Not exactly sure what match we're gonna have next, but we can go ahead and look at the maps for round three, which are going to be Rainmaker on Inkblot Art Academy, Splat Zones on Muscle Forge Fitness, and Tower Control on the Reef.
I'm going to say right now, Inkblot Art Academy is definitely my favorite map so far. I was a huge fan of Walleye Warehouse in Splatoon 1, and Inkblot Art Academy is basically just a better version of Walleye Warehouse.
Yeah, Inkblot has it's sort of like a mix of a couple different maps. It has like the kind of Walleye Warehouse style of moving out into the center of the map and where the base is, where the zone is, and how there's a top middle structure in the center of the zone to kind of facilitate that. It also has some flavors of Museum de la I just call it Museum, whatever.
Yeah, we know.
Museum from Splat 1, where it has those kind of lower dock areas that you can move to the side of the map and then climb your way back on to kind of flank. And then it also, the way the top mid structure is designed and the specific locations of the other tall structures that lead to the top mid structure actually kind of reminds me of Top Mid and Blackbelly Skate Park. The game doesn't play like Blackbelly Skate Park on that map because it's not as small, but the approach options you have to top mid directly, especially in splat zones, kind of remind me of Blackbelly Skate Park in a good way.
Yeah, I didn't think about that at all. That top middle structure, I just kind of assumed it was just like a bigger middle box in Walleye Warehouse, but no, the parallel that you made to Blackbelly Skate Park is actually way more precise. I like that. If you get someone with a weapon with some sort of range on it, that's some insane control. A good thing about Inkblot Art Academy, though, is that while standing on that top middle structure is very, very strong, it's also dangerous because there's a lot of ways for the enemy team to actually take you off of that.
Yeah, top mid control does require your team to also control different parts of the center of the map, which are going to enable you to stay top mid, because you're already going to have to be worrying about snipers and bombs and stuff coming from the enemy side of the map. A flank would be pretty devastating, so good communication and coordination is required to control top mid on Art Academy. If you know that your flanks are covered and that you're safe, you can just focus on what you see in front of you and use that top mid area to throw bombs, to get a height advantage on the enemy, etc. And that is going to pay dividends, just the same as Blackbelly and honestly and Museum and Walleye Warehouse. The control of mid makes a big difference.
Right, and speaking of, this is Rainmaker. So a lot of strategy in Rainmaker and Inkblot Art Academy comes out from trying to push into the enemy's platform just outside of the middle area of the map, which is more of a choke than it actually seems. It seems like this big open ridge, but it's actually there's actually some very precise gunfights that actually go out here. A lot of what teams do is they'll have their very aggressive players push up. Wow, obviously, good job, Vest. And they'll have the Rainmaker sit back on the top structure or somewhere down in the middle area and actually just fire Rainmaker shots into the top, trying to get those picks. They just communicate with their team, say there's a guy right here, and the Rainmaker says got it, and just zeroes in. They've got the protractor out, and then hopefully the dude just blows up. But it's not always that easy.
Yeah, and of course, Rainmaker and Tower Control on this map, the top middle structure is actually removed and turned into two smaller structures to the left and right of that, kind of similar to how Tower Control on Museum and Splatoon 1 got rid of the top mid structure in favor of the tower spawn and some boxes for cover. We see the same thing happening here on Inkblot Art Academy. So instead of controlling the very top middle structure, you're going to want to control two structures to the left and right of mid, and you have to push the Rainmaker to the left. Unlike most maps, there is one choke point where the Rainmaker has to move through, and that means that longer range weapons like Echo from EXT that we see on Extermination, and I'm not exactly sure who's going to be... Oh, Aurora. So it looks like Ezreal is playing for 101.5 the Hammer FN. This is Wolf's team, so we're going to have most likely Ezreal playing a long-range weapon for the Hammer, while Echo will be sniping for EXT. So we have two potent snipers, one on each team, and we have a lot of aggressive close-range players. We see Pixel, a very well-known Tenatech. We also have Nils on Extermination, formerly Shadow, who is also a very prominent Tenatech, as well as we see Blasters, we see other shooters, we see Mullen with a Slosher. So this matchup should go pretty interestingly. As we said, the Rainmaker will have to be moving left in order to progress, and that's going to involve those long-range weapons, but also those short-range weapons like the Sloshers and Blasters that we just talked about.
I just say that I love the team name of 101.5 the Hammer FM. That's I would never think of something like that. And it's like obscure, yet at the same time it just works.
So I know where that name actually comes from. There's some
give
chart.
me the story.
There's a chart that got posted in my Discord where it had names of different animals and the proper name that you call a group of those animals. So it started out with like a school of fish and like a herd of cattle and stuff, but it started to get
How does this relate to a radio station?
Well, the further down the list you got, the wackier the names got, to the point where it was like an uneasy partnership of coyotes and a 101.5 the Hammer FM of moths. So everybody thought it was really funny, and I guess Wolf really liked that one in particular. So he went with that for his team name.
That's like when you're looking down a list and you just like find something really obscure and you're like, oh, I'm gonna snipe that. Let's use
that. Wolf is one with the memes, as we all know. So an opportunity like that for him to pass up is something that, well, my sentence kind of dropped there. But yeah, an opportunity like that is something Wolf isn't going to pass up.
Yeah, after Inkblot Art Academy, we got Muscle Forge Fitness Splat Zones. This is actually our first time seeing both of these maps. I think all three of these maps actually so far. Yeah, I believe the other two rounds that we watched were both 2-0, so we only got to see 2 of the 3 maps there, which means these 3 maps we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, so these are 3 maps that are brand new to Splatoon 2. There's only 2 remakes. We've already seen them both, so we got those out of the way in the earlier rounds. Muscle Forge Fitness is kind of it's kind of strange. It's like a very small Flounder Heights from Splatoon 1. It has this raised roof structure in the center of the map with pits on both sides of that raised center structure, and then it has a kind of high ground base structure for you to work with to get back into the center of the map. But unlike Flounder Heights from Splatoon 1, that pit area is not very large, so you can go from the upper areas directly to the top middle structure, whereas in Splatoon 1 you had to drop down and swim through the pit and then climb up the walls to get the top mid. So that's going to change a lot of the kind of stagnant layout that we saw in Splatoon 1's version of that map. So that means that teams are going to have a lot more interesting firefights moving towards the center of the stage than we saw in Splat 1.
An interesting thing about Muscle Forge Fitness is it's a very flat map that at the same time has a ton of verticality to it. There's a lot of ways for you to get like vertical jumps on the enemy team. There's a lot of ways to push both on the tops and bottom sides of the maps. But in the same way, they both feel very flat and stagnant. It's if you have the proper weapons, you can control them all from the same spot. But at the same time, there's just it's so open and free in certain places that it's not always just like a, does this gun control this good? It's there's a lot of free form movement and strategy to it.
Yeah, it's a very strange map. Oh, sorry. It's a very strange map. So a lot of the kind of which weapons work in which situations and how do you control different spots and how it's not very straightforward. It's definitely a map that's going to take a while for us to learn. That we do see a lot of kind of blasters and brushes and stuff kind of taking advantage of that confusion and getting the close range kills. But as we go into the future, we're definitely going to see the map figured out more. And I do want to mention that it looks like the 2 teams that we were going to cast did start already. So now we are going to be working with Kaha, oh gosh, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Kaha Maori? I'll just call them KM. Yeah, that's fine. And Inklings next door, which is a phrase that I can pronounce. And both of these teams, I don't know too much about. I think I've seen Stealth around maybe in solo queue before. I recognize
the name. Yeah.
Yeah, I recognize the stars. So maybe it's just been someone else with the stars like that. And KM I don't recognize at all, especially considering that their clan tag does not match what their name is.
Well, no, it's the second half of Maori.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Apparently, I'm not very good with names, but hopefully we do get these players into the lobby soon, as this is going to be our round 3 maps, and this is again 2 teams that we don't know much about, so it should be pretty interesting to to see how some unknowns play out. We're not going to be necessarily just watching some higher level teams kind of beat some lower level teams, or see things that we already know about as these 2 teams get back into the lobby. But I guess that also brings us, while these players get into the lobby, tower control on the reef.
Tower control on the reef is very interesting. I actually really like the reef, and at the same time, I really hate the reef. It's very similar to Muscle Forge Fitness in the same concepts that I mentioned. It's very open, but at the same time, it's not open at all. And it kind of just depends on what your weapon is, what the game mode is, the way you position yourself. You know, you can kind of choose if you want the map to be really open for you, you know, have a lot of line of sight, or if you want to be, you know, kind of confined into smaller areas and, you know, have those flank routes.
Yeah, no, you can definitely tell that that the Reef was the first map that was designed for this game, and I know that the
feels very vanilla.
Yeah, I know that that they have gone out and say that the Reef was the first map that they designed for Splatoon 2, as evidenced by us seeing very early versions of it in the first trailer. It's also the first map that's selected when you started the game, similar to how Urchin Underpass was the same map that was selected in Splatoon 1. And this map it kind of echoes Urchin Underpass in some ways. You know, it has a somewhat similar mid structure and a similar design. But the similarities kind of stop there. You can tell that like the map was inspired by Urchin Underpass, but plays a lot differently. Whereas Urchin
got a little bit of a voice lag going on there. Hopefully it's not too bad.
Oh, voice lag as in.
Oh, I think you're good now. You might just want to start over that last sentence.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the Urchin Underpass compared to the Reef, Urchin Underpass was a very difficult map to get out of your base on. There were two side flanks that you could go to, but they were very long, narrow flanks that were easily defended, and you had to completely take yourself away from any kind of action in order to approach those flanks. And if you had to move back more towards the main firefight in order to continue, what would end up happening is you would just be completely out of the game for a long time, and your teammates would kind of get like 4v3'd and you'd lose. But the Reef is designed differently. All of the different ways that there's more than 3 ways out of the map. There's a lot of top structures for you to approach the middle of the map from, and they all are protected well, but they also have alternate paths you can take that can lead you towards your teammates should you push out in kind of the wrong direction. So for example, if you go to the left on the Reef, instead of there just being one drop down at the end of the hallway, there's 3 drop downs as you go. So if you decide to take that left path to get out of the middle of the map and your teammates need you, you can just make an early right, get back into the fight, and just be able to contribute right away. So that difference in design took what used to be Urchin Underpass, which was kind of known for being a poorly designed map that was hard to take back map control, to a much more balanced and stable map.
Yeah, the Reef is very it's kind of just like Nintendo just screaming their new map design philosophy at us. You can see a lot of the philosophy that went into this map is very apparent in the other maps. You can tell that this was definitely the first one, and then they made this map. They said, hey, we like what we did here, let's do the same thing in other maps. And you can definitely tell that this is the origin of all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of makes me interested in seeing. I would like to see what order the maps in this game were developed. I know that sometimes you can tell that by looking at the stage select screen, but I know for a fact that some of the maps that were made later in development in Splatoon 1 were not at the beginning of the list in Splatoon 1. So I guess it's just kind of maybe something that we can eventually get revealed to us someday. But I would like to kind of see the maps in the order they were developed, and
that would be interesting. Yeah, to
kind of take a look. Okay, like what ideas did they have? How did they move from map to map? And you know, like kind of get a little bit of insight into the design process. A lot of people don't realize how much of a difference characters and maps and different mechanics, how different they can be depending on when in development they were made. A lot of times in fighting games in particular, the characters that are made earlier in development, the development team sees potential balance issues with them earlier. They have more opportunities to find potential balance issues, and they'll nerf that character preemptively, whereas characters that are made later in development, they might not get the same treatment. There's not as many opportunities for the dev team to see potential problems. So what a lot of times in fighting games, the tier list ends up reflecting in a way which characters were made later in development. That's not always the case, but you do see a lot of that where characters that were made early in development are just kind of weakened too much because the developers had more times to nerf them, whereas like a lot of the characters that end up being kind of crazy were added later in development. So with maps, it's not always the same way. Sometimes it's actually the opposite, where sometimes maps are a little bit bland if they've been made early in development because the devs have seen too many things. Oh, we don't want this to be here, we don't want that to be there, and the map kind of gets a little bit, you have to behave more. Whereas the maps that are made later in development have all kinds of crazy strategies and stuff that people didn't think of at first, and that can actually make the maps more fun.
An interesting thing about Splatoon map design in general is that as opposed to a lot of other shooters, Splatoon, all of the weapons have limited range. There's no, hit scan weapons that just travel infinitely instantly. So there's actually a lot of really, really weird map design obstacles, barriers, hurdles that they would have had to have crossed in order to actually make some of these maps work as well as they have. Being able to make sure that a lot of these maps can play well in only close range situations for the most part is definitely something that I would be really, really interested to see, what their thought process was behind and, how they did it, especially with, definitely with starting with Splatoon 1 and moving into Splatoon 2 especially.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I find game design to be pretty interesting. So when you start to look into games and see trends like that, it kind of makes you look for it in other games as well. Also in weapons at the same time. I don't think that in Splatoon 1 the weapons were released in the same order that they were developed. Like I know, for example, Slashing Machine definitely was developed later in the game's life cycle because Slashing Machine wasn't even complete on the disc until the patch came out that completed the weapon. But I'd like to see how that works out in Splat 2, especially when it comes to kits. As we've seen so far with data mining, there have been weapons that had certain kits on the disc, and then they've been updated on the disc before their release with different kits. I guess that maybe in play testing they found that some of the kits were too strong or not strong enough, or found potential problems or anything like that. But I don't know, man. This just makes me want to like dig deeper. The data mining aspect of Splatoon is actually kind of interesting because we get to see this stuff ahead of time and kind of theory craft about it.
Right. Gonna throw a topic change here. Let's talk about some of the weapons from Splatoon 1 that were very, very strong and prominent in the game's meta.
Mm-hmm.
All those weapons are for the most part in Splatoon 2. One of the weapons that was really, really big, the Dynamo, is basically not being touched in Splatoon 2.
Yeah, the Dynamo definitely got nerfed a lot, and I don't know how the Dynamo really should be balanced, because the thing about the Dynamo in Splat 1, it painted so well that all of the other weapons that had a primary purpose of being able to paint well at the expense of blank were kind of not used, because the Dynamo painted so well that if you were another weapon that didn't paint as well as Dynamo, but you sacrificed something, you would just lose the Dynamo. It would cost you a lot of map control. In Splatoon 2, a lot of weapons paint well. We have the mini splatling, we have nozzle noses, we have some SMGs, especially the spray ones have been buffed a bit, so there's a lot of potential to that. We have the longer range splatlings, we have new weapons that can spam bombs differently, and there seems to be a lot more variety of weapons that can paint well at the expense of maybe some combat potential or whatever that are seeing use, where if maybe the Dynamo was present, those weapons wouldn't be picked.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. The thing with the Dynamo in Splatoon 2 is the painting on it has actually gotten worse, very slightly. That's actually not just the Dynamo, it's all of the rollers. Actually, their horizontal flick, this is not the new vertical flick that was added in Splatoon 2. Their regular old horizontal flick, they don't paint as well as they did in Splatoon 1. And the Dynamo especially, it feels like it was kind of like a percentage thing that they nerfed. All of them paint 30% less, which for the Dynamo, 30% is a lot more than a carbon roller 30%.
Yeah.
And because of that, it doesn't throw out as much ink. It doesn't paint as well. It also doesn't damage as well. Another big thing is that there's no damage up perk in this game, which means the Dynamo is not reliable at all for getting kills.
Yeah, no, the Dynamo definitely has a range decrease for the distance that it can one-shot kill. The vertical flick can two-shot pretty consistently, but only if the enemy stays around for both of them.
It's
exactly.
Slow.
The horizontal flick is actually faster than it was in Splat 2, but because it has less of a kill range and paints less, it kind of makes the Dynamo's really slow movement and kind of clunkiness in general actually start to really hurt it. Whereas Splatoon 1, if you challenge a Dynamo and it was deciding to shoot at you, you would just die. But in Splatoon, and you would have to work around that and trick the Dynamo into flicking at the wrong time in order to get your kill. Whereas in Splatoon 2, a lot of times you won't even die, and the Dynamo can't take another action afterwards. So I guess if you kind of say that in Splatoon 1 you had to make the Dynamo waste his flick in order to beat him, In
That's a good way to put
Splatoon
it.
2, sometimes the Dynamo just wastes its own flick on not getting the kill,
Yeah.
and that can give it some problems. That all being said, I do think that the amount of paints isn't that bad, and the Gold Dynamo getting Toxic Mist and Ink Armor does
Right.
give it some more potential. And I think that dynamos that learn the new kill ranges and learn to be a little bit more aggressive and learn how to best take advantage of how it can paint and the vertical flick being able to help out like team fights and stuff. I think that there's definitely some potential for people to get good with Dynamo. I just don't think it's going to be something that just can go on almost every team all the time and still do well. I think that there are other weapons that are going to be just so good at painting to the point where they can get picked based purely on their painting ability and do well. I feel like the Dynamo is going to be a bit more of a niche pick.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I feel that too. The H3D nozzle nose, I think it's going to be a hot pick for a lot of painters and support weapons. Ooh, it's got a sprinkler and ink armor on it. That's going to be the ink armor spammer. You know, even if we haven't actually mentioned yet, ink armor right now is very, very strong, and in the future, if it ever gets changed, maybe it's not as good. It will still definitely be usable. I have faith in the Splatoon dev team to not nerf it to the point where it's just bad. The H3D, you're definitely going to see a lot of people using that just to spam out as many ink armors as possible because it's such a good weapon at painting. As well as the Hydra Splatling is also similar. I think that one has Toxic Mist as well as ink armor. So that's going to be a very, very defensive weapon used on especially on maps like coincidentally Inkblot Art Academy. It's going to be huge there.
Yeah, I think a lot of that rides on how good the Hydra actually is at painting.
Right.
We've seen some weapons that were good at painting in Splat 1 have their painting output nerfed. And just so everyone knows, the teams are getting into the lobby. Players from both teams are joining now, so we should be able to start this out shortly. Sorry for the delay. But the Hydra Splatling is definitely, as long as it can paint decently well, it's more than likely going to be able to be a weapon that can stand back, go for long range picks, get kills, and then just kind of spam those ink armors out from a distance. There are, of course, a lot of ways that could be changed, and we don't know anything about the Hydra yet, as it's the only Splatling in the game that's not released yet. But it's definitely looking to have a lot of potential. I do think that ink armor is not quite as strong as people think it is. I think that I think a phenomenon that's happening is people that the ink armor is kind of straightforward to use, and teams that are using ink armor right now are purposely picking weapons that can paint well. They're painting the map and they're coordinating their specials. So does that mean that the ink armor is what's winning the games, or is it the coordination, special pushes, and map control that's doing it? The teams might kind of like be accidentally winning because they're going for a strategy that tricks them into playing well, if that makes sense.
I think the thing with ink armor is that it was really, really, really strong in the first week of the game's life, and it's actually dying down a lot now. People are also realizing how to play against it. Oh yeah, Object Shredder too, right?
Yeah, Object Shredder weapon. Putting Object Shredder on weapons that can't normally deal with armor that much gives them a damage bonus versus armor, and also players are realizing that the way they're supposed to deal with armor is to chip away a tiny bit at the armor and then go in and get the kill, and instead of just kind of standing next to the person and holding down the trigger. A lot of Tenatechs, for example, have trouble with ink armor because they run up to the ink armor and they start shooting. The ink armor goes away after one Tenatech bullet, but it takes a moment to do so. So the Tenatech will put like 5 bullets into the ink armor or something like that, and they'll only get the damage from one of them because they just kind of held down the trigger when the armor was active. You're kind of supposed to just get rid of the armor somehow,
right? And
then get the kill.
Splatoon being such like a muscle memory heavy game where you kind of just like expect things to happen, and you're normally thinking about other things, like your teammates' positions, enemy positions. That's what's going on in your head, whereas when you're actually shooting people, that's all muscle memory and just pure reaction. When stuff like ink armor comes out that changes the way your muscle memory needs to work, that's why it was strong. But people are slowly realizing that they can't just hold down the trigger on ink armor. They're realizing they have to pop it before they can fight them.
Yeah, and as we are loading up here into Rainmaker on Inkblot Art Academy, we're gonna see some of the stuff that we talked about. Maybe we'll even see some ink armor. I'll go ahead and check the kits once we start up this game.
It's a game.
Yeah. So again, I apologize for that kind of lobby simulator going on, but we see a Tri-Slasher on one team and 2 ink armors on the other team. So this is pretty interesting here, as we have 3 armors in the game now. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry, we have 4 because there's also a 96 gal. And we see, actually, no special charge, at least not in mains, equipped for these players as we go into this first match.
So this is Rainmaker. We got the side boxes on that we mentioned like probably 20 minutes ago. And you see what I believe the blue team we're watching right now is Inklings next door. Didn't actually get a look at the lobby.
Yeah, blue is Inkling next door, and they do have the Tri-Slasher and the 96 Gal, so a mix of that one slaying weapon that gets ink armor not that often, and a more support-based weapon that's going to get ink armor a lot to kind of round off the combat ink armor potential. Double kill going down from that Rainmaker, as Inklings next door is able to take advantage of a 3 versus 1 situation and get the Rainmaker over this critical wall area. Or can they? Do they? Yes, they do. Very, like we talked about there, that one checkpoint there where that wall was the one spot where you have to take the Rainmaker in order to move forward. Not able to get to that many more points past 62, as Yellow Team is able to defend here. In a 3v2 situation, Yellow Team has specials. We see 10 missiles going down. Yellow Team moving up towards the center of the map. Now, the center of the map is more or less blue right now, so there are going to have to be a few more plays made before Yellow Team can get back control of the map as we see this neutral situation take place.
Right, and a 62-point push in the first minute of the game is actually very, very strong. That's pretty much one of the best situations you could ask for, other than, you know, like obviously pushing more. But like it might seem like they kind of just like wasted their time and didn't push it that far. But 62 points in a map like this is actually pretty key, because they were able to get it up over that box, which is a huge choke point for the Rainmaker that all people have to do is just shoot at, and then the Rainmaker can't go up it.
Speaking of this choke point, the Rainmaker has gotten to the choke point on the other side of the map as it is pushed back. Even though it's not to kind of follow up on what you said, even though it's not the most points to get to just 62, of course you can get a lot better than 62 points, even on a map like this, it does force the other team to take the initiative to push, and that you can make them come to you. Because it's so difficult to get past that checkpoint, even if you've only passed it by a few points, it does force the enemy team to try pretty hard to get back control. And as we are coming to the midway point of this game, we're seeing exactly that. Yellow Team was forced to kind of overcommit to push. Some members did go down, and now Inklings next door is able to pick up the Rainmaker again to push onto KM in the yellow on their side of the map, and we might see another Rainmaker push happen here in the next few seconds.
Right, and as I mentioned earlier, the Rainmaker sitting up on top of the box is trying to get some picks off with this big blast that it has now in this game. And, you know, they got the teammates pushing out. They're trying to ink that. They're looking for an opportunity to push in. Unfortunately, that choke point is just so strong. It's so hard to get the Rainmaker actually pushed past that.
Yeah, the Rainmaker is probably... We're going to see the Rainmaker die a lot on that wall in the next coming games, as KM is able to pick up the Rainmaker and start a push. Now, it is a 3v4 situation for them, and the Rainmaker does go down, so this push is going to be stopped short, but not before KM is able to kind of make a presence in the center of the map. 10 missiles are going to go up, going to help his teammates push up. Hopefully those positions were called out, as this Jet Squelcher player is going to just try to paint as much as possible, not die. Watch this right side choke, because it's the only way that the enemies can come from, as his teammates are able to kind of push up in the mid and the mid and left sides to try to take back map control.
The Jet Squelcher is absolutely a very, very key part of their team composition right here. He's got a lot of range, very, very good at defending, as well as the Toxic Mist, making it insanely difficult for the Rainmaker to push up that wall, which is already hard. And the range that comes up from the Jet Squelcher on a map like this is actually basically just what you need to cover almost all of the middle section from your safe zone on your platform.
Yeah, the Jet Squelcher definitely has been solidified as a member of the kind of long-range classification of weapons in Splatoon 2. It used to just be Chargers, and we got a little bit of Splatlings towards the end of Splatoon 1's life. But in Splatoon 2, we have Chargers that may be a little bit weaker than before, Splatlings that are definitely stronger, and the Jet Squelcher is much, much stronger. Considering how much vision it gets with its special, the ability to run thermal ink on it, it's just a really good team support weapon that actually paints decently well compared to Splatoon 1.
Yeah, and especially on a map like this where there's such a big open field in the middle, the Jet Squelcher being able to paint, you know, it's obviously not the best weapon at painting, but the range more than makes up for that. So pushing out of map control, pushing out of your enemy's map control is made very, very easy with the Jet Squelcher, because you just have such a range advantage.
Yeah, I forget exactly how much the painting power of the Jet Squelcher was buffed, but there definitely is a difference. And like I said, the combination of thermal ink being useful on the weapon plus the missiles gives it a lot of potential. But we are closing in the end of the game, only a few seconds left. Inklings next door does have the Rainmaker, so unless it's taken out, which it is...
just right before the end of the game. They got the overtime, though.
But KM, it's a 1 versus 2 situation. The Rainmaker's going to have to be popped and picked up soon, but no, the Tentatek is going to be taken out, and Inklings next door is going to be able to take the Rainmaker, and as they pick it up, which they do, that is going to be game 1.
Very low scoring game to see. It's so difficult to push the Rainmaker against, you know, like a coordinated team on this map, unless you get like a full team wipe. And the thing with these teams and, you know, them being as coordinated as they are is that when you have a weapon such as a 96 gal or a jet squelcher, when your teammates start dropping, Germ 22 eliminations. Whoa.
Well, that is a combination of assists and kills. So most likely that was just that Junior getting a ton of armors up, as the I think the Junior is the most meter efficient armor weapon in the game right now.
Yeah, it was the only one that wasn't changed, I believe, on that balance patch, that very, very small balance patch that they released like a couple days about a week ago now.
Yeah, so that does give Junior some reason to be used compared to NZAP, which there really wasn't much of a reason before. And a lot of teams are using the Junior to be like their kind of armor spamming machine. We'll see if they use that again on Muscle Forge Fitness, another map where you know, the strategies are kind of up in the air. There is no real straightforward way to take on this map yet that we've seen from teams. A lot of teams approaching it differently. So we'll see if Ori. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll see if who was it exactly? Was it so it was Germ?
Germ was on the Junior.
Oh yeah, so we'll see if Germ picks that Junior again. Will be a pretty nice weapon to play on this map, especially considering that once you get up top with the Junior, you can use your height advantage to paint a lot, which kind of takes the range advantage that the NZAP has and maybe kind of mitigates it a little bit. But there are, of course, other specials that are pretty good on this map. Inkjet being one of them, Bomb Rush being one of them. Actually, Inkstorm pretty good on this map just because of how compact it is. The Inkstorm does open up a lot of opportunity to push, so we'll see if if either team switches up their weapon comp significantly. And if we don't, I definitely think that Ori unfortunately had trouble kind of moving out of their base. Jet Squelcher was doing its thing. It got a lot of missiles. It painted a lot. It kind of kept tabs on people. But they really need to take the opportunities that something like the Jet Squelcher or another member pushing forward creates to help push it back into the map. And they need to just pick an area, drill it, get back in. Especially in splat zones where if you just kind of sit there in your base like what happened last game, the game will be over much sooner and it won't go to overtime. You'll just lose.
Whoa, that's a dynamo.
That is a dynamo, so we'll see how that ends up going. This is a map where, because of the curvature of the center of the map, it can be a little bit easier for the dynamo to get in a position to get those kills. So we'll see how it goes. NZAP and Tri-Slash are going to bring the armors and more direct combat from Ori, while the dynamo is hopefully going to be able to paint as we see a 3v4 situation at the start of the game.
Do you think they were watching the stream at the start of the match and we were trash talking the Dynamo and they said, "Hi, yeah, let me show you."
That's always a possibility. Looking to take out that armored up Dynamo right there. As interestingly, no one is wearing Object Shredder in this lobby, so the NZAP in particular is going to have some difficulty with enemies using armor on the enemy team because it'll be a little harder to take out that shield. But that all being said, Inklings next door is able to take the map. They are able to get the clock down to 30 seconds right away. And again, we see Ori or KM in the green having difficulty to get back to the center of the map. And armor does go down from this Tri-Slasher though, and they are able to take the zone. So
that was the push they needed.
Yeah, we'll see how they're able to take advantage of this.
And the Tri-Slosher is another very, very strong weapon on this map, again, due to the verticality. And Sloshers, I think it goes without saying that verticality is their game. Oh, the Inkjet coming out. Tri-Slosher up on the wall there, unfortunately went unnoticed for the most part. And able to pick off the Inkjet, you know, keeping a very, very good push up on the KM side right now.
Ori is going to get some help over here as he pushes the trash. Unfortunately, there's not a little bit of discoordination, which does lead to Inklings next door getting control. Now, Inklings next door does have a penalty to work through, so Ori is going to be able to kind of push back and most likely stop the timer from getting under 24, but it depends on how things go. They're not really in the best situation right now as Inklings next door does continue to get some kills on them and as the timer starts to go down.
That was a brilliant use of the splashdown from Stealth, using it specifically to zone, but it was so unexpected that it actually ended up getting a splat there for Stealth, which I just got to point out, they're using the Ink Brush right now. Yeah,
Ink Brush I think might be the fastest to build splashdown in the game. I forget exactly what Splattershot has, but it's definitely a weapon that can spam it if it so chooses to, and which seems like they are able to use it to good effect, and that is actually going to beat the game. So again, KM had difficulty pushing out of their base versus Inkling next door. There was some back and forth, kind of like there was last game, but every time that Inklings next door got control, KM had difficulty getting back to the map, or when they finally did get back to the map, KM wasn't really able to dominate as well. So it seemed to just be a little bit outplayed there, leading to this 2-0.
Right, and actually, fantastic job from Inklings next door, because they had like a 56-point penalty about halfway through the game there, and actually managed to take it all off in one go. You know, they had no problem pushing back in from the Ori control, and they actually, you know, they were able to solidify their lead. They did a really good job holding that from that point.
Yeah, no, definitely. Map control and holding a lead, especially in something like splat zones, is very important. And as we saw, the effects of that were pretty great, because the game kind of went pretty convincingly into Inklings next door's hands.